Remember to check out sarahsnakeshop.com for corn snakes and corn snake accessories, including corn snake morph books, t-shirts, notepads, masks, as well as other things.
Hey everybody, Sarah here. So as you can probably tell, today's a little bit of a different video, but we'll get into why in just a minute. Before we get started, I want to mention if you guys have not checked out the book giveaway that I'm doing on Kathy Love's book, please go click the link that I'm going to put up above and go check that out if you would like your chance to win a copy of that book or possibly even donate so that someone else might be able to get a copy. I'm kind of doing like a donation pool there, and we've gotten a few people who have donated a little extra, but I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to see it and to comment in case they do want a copy, or to donate in case they want to give a copy to someone else. That video didn't really get a whole lot of views, comparatively speaking, or at least not as I expected it to. So if you are interested in that book, or if you're interested in helping to give that book to someone else, please go click that up above. And I'm going to give it one more week. Normally I do the book giveaways the first Friday of the month, but I'm gonna not do that just so we can actually have a little extra time this month. Before we get started, also I want to thank all the members on this channel. You guys are amazing. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the channel and for being an active part of the channel. You are the reason that we are able to do everything that we do here, so thank you so much. If anybody else would like to become a member, we have two tiers now. We have the neonates tier, which is $2 a month, and we have the well-started tier, which is $5 a month. Each tier has its own benefits, so feel free to check those out if you would like to become a member. And if not, if you can't afford to be a member, or it's just not something you want to do right now, you can also support by just clicking the thanks button and give a little tip with that, or just subscribing or liking or anything like that also really helps the channel. So today's video is going to be a little bit weird. It was halfway inspired by one of you guys who suggested that I do reviews on online care guides for snakes, and when I was looking for that, I found another video that I think I actually want to react to. I have not watched this video all the way through, but it is a creator that I do actually watch a lot. His name is Dwyer, and I don't know how I'm going to feel about this video. I will have to pause a lot in between and cut a lot of stuff out, but he actually did a video on Jay of Prehistoric Pets. Now, I've never met Jay. I don't know Jay, but I have been following Prehistoric Pets for a long time. He has done a lot of like helping to educate people, but there's also some issues kind of going on in the background as well, and so I think that this is probably going to cover that, and I just want to sort of react to it and comment on it at the same time. Please go check out Sid's video if you want to see everything, like the whole thing. His video is almost a half hour long, but I am going to kind of cut it down. I'm going to also like sort of commentate from a reptile breeder's perspective, anything that he has to say. Okay, so this is Sid, this is his YouTube channel, and we're gonna see what this is all about. Obviously it's about Jay. Sid is one of those YouTubers that kind of calls out bad people for things, so I have a feeling this is not going to be super positive.
Hi everyone, my name is Sid. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking about Jay Brewer from Prehistoric Pets and Reptile Zoo. And if you haven't heard about him at all, you will learn all about him in this video.
Okay, so this whole first section is really just a general history of how Jay opened his business and all that. I'm gonna probably cut most of that out because that's something that either a lot of you probably already know if you watch his videos, or you can go watch Sid's video.
He wanted to help change people's perception of them. The perception that he saw a lot of people had towards reptiles were that they were some scary thing that were out to kill them. He thought that children didn't know any better, so he hosted a lot of events that were geared towards children.
So I don't really like the way that this is phrased. It's just kind of this whole like, oh, he wasn't going to be able to convince adults, and so he started trying to convince children. It's like, well, it's really all about education. I don't really see anything negative about this so far. I don't see anything wrong with fearing things toward children. There's a really good chance that if the parents are like terrified of snakes, they're not going to take their kid to something like this anyway. I feel like Sid kind of twisted some words there to make it seem negative. Since I watch Sid's videos pretty much regularly, kind of already know where this is going, but let's just see what other content we actually have here.
YouTube channel continued to grow, however, and so did the amount of people coming into his store. But it actually soon turned into a problem business-wise, guys, they weren't there to buy anything. So since people were treating it like a zoo, in 2008, Jay started charging a $5 entry fee. But as you can imagine, people weren't all too happy about having to pay to get into what was supposed to be a pet store.
If you think about it though, he did call it the Reptile Zoo. Like, I don't really feel like there's an issue with charging a fee to come in just to hold things and pet things. It's essentially what Brian Barczyk did, and you do have to buy tickets to go to the Reptarium. It would be more reasonable for Jay to have that sort of separation, like maybe have one of the shops that he bought up as like his breeding facility, and then the rest of it could be the zoo that you do charge for. So like, I'm not seeing too many issues with this, except maybe there should have been a little bit more like obvious separation. I do understand the sort of hesitancy because I have had that happen before. People are like, I want to come look at them and we promise we're gonna buy one, and then they come and they hold a bunch of snakes and then they leave. That is just a boundary that I had to make. You need to have an appointment, like have one picked out that you want, or at least maybe 2 to 3 that you're choosing between. But all that is to say, I don't blame him for charging a $5 entry fee. I mean, if you're gonna treat it like a zoo, charge like a zoo. I mean, that's what they do at the Reptarium. I don't really see any issues with that.
2009, he created the Reptile Zoo. So basically, Prehistoric Pets and the Reptile Zoo were 2 businesses under the same roof. There wasn't an entry fee for the Prehistoric Pets portion of the store.
So that makes sense.
But if you wanted to go in further and check out the display reptiles, then you had to pay a $15 entry fee for an adult or a $10 fee for a child. Put an emphasis on rare and unique reptiles, but he also set out to create his own. He did this by breeding different kinds of python morphs together.
So that's like pretty much every breeder ever. I don't know anybody who is like breeding like purposely. They don't have some kind of goal in mind. Some people want to keep like pure lines pure, and that's perfectly fine, but 99% probably of snake breeders are aiming for some kind of morph. Even an Okatee is considered a morph. I'm not sure if he's talking about this in a positive or negative way, and I don't want to linger on this too long, but this is not uncommon and it's not unethical as long as you can understand how to care for the morphs that you are producing properly. If you get something that's scaleless, that's probably going to need a little bit of a different environment. Same way if you get an albino or anything that doesn't have melanin is also going to need a slightly different environment, maybe less UV light or something like that. It's not unethical, and it's also not uncommon. From a breeder's perspective, that's like super common and not, so far, like, I'm only 5 minutes into the video, but I haven't really seen anything like negative happening so far.
He also does a similar morph crisscrossing with iguanas, but unfortunately albino iguanas are pretty much blind.
I understand why he uses the word experimenting, because everything is a little bit of an experiment. And I think most people, you're not purposely going out of your way to produce something that's blind. A lot of people would say that iguana is being well cared for despite not having eyesight because it's an albino. If you have a pet and you know what it needs to survive, I don't really see the issue with having that pet. I do see an issue with purposely producing things that you know are going to have problems, and that is where a lot of people don't like the scaleless snakes of any kinds, corn snakes, ball pythons, whatever it may be. I see the blindness very similar to scaleless, where if that animal is being cared for properly, it's not like it's really suffering. So it does have this moral gray area, and I understand why Sid, who's presumably not really in the reptile community, may kind of see an issue with that, maybe have more of an issue with blindness over like scalelessness. I don't know. He hasn't mentioned scaleless, and he may not. I don't know. I'm just sort of commenting as we're going on here.
As a host of other reptiles with deformities or certain things that make them stand out. He's had a couple of 2-headed rat snakes over the years. He's had pythons without any eyes.
Okay, so the 2 heads, that's not something you can produce on purpose. That's something that just, it happens or it doesn't. Even BHB has 2-headed king snake. So that's not like an experimenting thing. That's something that can just happen in the wild. It just does happen. It's a form of like twinning gone wrong. The fetus will sort of separate into two, and either it's just a partial separation where only the heads separate, or it's a complete separation and then they come back together making like a chimera. It can happen, and it happens to humans too. It happens to everything. So this is not something that he's purposely breeding for, and I don't think that it's really fair for anyone to be critical of that, Sid or not. Like I do really like Sid's videos. Like, I'm not trying to hit on anybody in this video at all. I'm just in the middle right now, commenting, I guess, on what this person is saying about another person who I have looked up to in the past. And as far as the hatching a python with no eyes, pythons are even better, like snakes in general are even better than iguanas without sight, because like iguanas actually kind of use their eyes, so producing ones that you know are blind is a little worse than a snake that you know is blind, because snakes barely, I mean, they kind of use their eyes, but it's not in the same way that other animals do. The only truly blind snake is one without a tongue. Snakes don't use their eyes really to hunt. They don't really use their eyes for a whole lot, honestly, and especially not in captivity. So, and again, that's not really something that you can breed for on purpose, and it's also probably not something that Jay produced on purpose. But do you just put that animal down simply because it doesn't have eyes? Like, is that where we're at right now? Like, if you found a stray kitten on the road who didn't have eyes, would you be like, oh, I guess we're going to put this kitten down because it doesn't have eyes? Like, no, you're going to find someone who can take care of it. Like, hopefully, I would hope. I watch a lot of like cat rescues and stuff on YouTube and TikTok, and I'm always really happy to see a kitten who was born with only like 3 legs or no eyes or whatever actually gets a home that's taking good care of it. And so I don't believe that just because something hatches with 2 heads or with no eyes that it should just immediately be put down. And it's not a result of inbreeding, not like he did it on purpose. So I do not think that those should be points counted against Jay, even though Sid may be seeing that.
Draw cards to the zoo was Twinkie, a 22-foot long, 350-pound albino reticulated python. In 2012, she got the Guinness record for largest albino python in captivity. And then when Twinkie was 10 years old, Jay decided he wanted to try and breed her. He did it in the hopes of improving her health. Basically, a couple years prior to trying to breed her, she had completely lost her appetite. She also stopped showing interest in her surroundings. So in an attempt to improve her health and reset her natural cycle, Jay decided the only option was to try and breed her. He believes that a snake only has one goal in its life, and that is to reproduce. So
obviously a big snake, and she's probably around other males. She probably smells other males. She probably smells other ovulating females. There's a good chance that she was doing a lot of ovulating herself, which is part of the reason maybe she wasn't eating as much. A lot of people have more of a spiritual idea of humans and animals, and that's perfectly fine. You can have your spiritual feelings, like I have my own spiritual feelings about things, and so I'm not trying to discount that. When it comes to reality, everything that exists wants to continue the existence of its own species in general. That's why there are living things, is because everything, whether it's through pheromones, pollen, spores, whatever it is, everything has a drive to reproduce. So that's just my take on that.
Male python to Twinkie, they immediately started to breed. After that, Twinkie's shedding returned to normal, and she started to have a healthy eating schedule. The version of events that were explained in the blog post was that 3 months after mating, Twinkie laid just 1 egg. Then she lost her appetite. So the whole breeding thing that Jay tried to do wasn't a success.
It does seem like the snake is overweight. Like, honestly, it could very well be that she just isn't hungry. She is huge. She's absolutely huge, and she has an enclosure that she can fully stretch out in. So it's not so much that the enclosure is too small. I think that maybe she just needed a change. She just needed a switch up. Like, sometimes snakes get bored, especially snakes that are bigger like this. They are more intelligent. Sometimes they just get bored, and it could be that having that male around was preventing her from being bored. And the only laying 1 egg, I don't know if he took her to the vet or not. I'm hoping that this story, I don't know how this story ends. I'm hoping that it doesn't end with her like being egg bound from that. It could be, but let's just see where it goes.
So they permanently took her out of her display enclosure and put her in her feeding enclosure. That didn't work, and she died 1 month after her 11th birthday.
That is really sad because they're supposed to live longer than that. But I do think that that is a short lifespan. That's a short lifespan for pretty much any snake. So something definitely went wrong there.
But Jay thinks that these ping pong sized eggs inside a Twinkie were the issue. When he realizes that that could be the issue, he wants to try and get those ping pong sized eggs inside of her fertilized. Then they can form into a actual fertilized egg, and then she can lay those eggs, getting them out of her system. It was unsuccessful. Then he noticed her health rapidly decline, and then he called a vet. But by the time the vet arrived, she had already passed away. And he believes that the reason why she did ultimately die was because one of the ping pong sized eggs inside of her burst, or she had cancer.
It could very well be an egg binding issue. That's what it seems like to me. So she's a big snake. She bred. She went back to normal feeding schedule, back to normal shedding, back to everything being normal. And then she goes to lay eggs, and she only lays one. That would have been my first sign if it was me. Like, my snake might be egg bound. I need to take the snake to the vet. If that's how it went down and she was egg bound and he didn't do anything, that is an irresponsible thing.
In a video, he talked about what he does when a snake of his gets egg bound, and it's literally pretty much doing nothing.
We're going to wait till tomorrow, and then if she doesn't lay, really there's nothing you can do. You can take her to a vet, they can cut her open, and it'll ruin her for life for laying eggs.
Okay, well, that is incorrect. There are other things that you can do. I do agree with Jay in this waiting about 24 hours with what Jay just said. He just said there's nothing you can do. They're going to cut the snake open. That's not necessarily always the case. There are other options. You can aspirate the egg, which obviously I would suggest having a veterinarian handle this. Like a syringe with a needle on it, and you go up through, like, between the scales, literally through the snake into the egg, and you suck out the internal part of the egg into the syringe, and it collapses the egg and makes it smaller and hopefully easier for the female to pass. That's like one of the more common ways to go. Another thing that has that's really common that my vet has done for a couple of my females that got egg bound was they go in with like a pipette and with some lube, and they'll kind of go in and lube around the egg and then kind of work it back and forth, and then eventually like help the snake pass the eggs. And that is probably the most common way and probably safest way to do things. If you've waited that 24 hours, you only have about another 24 to 48 hours to get those eggs out before they can start becoming a problem. They can actually like adhere to the uterus on the inside, and then if you try to move them, it can tear the uterus, cause hemorrhaging. Like, there's a lot of issues that can happen with egg binding. So you do want to get that handled as soon as possible, like, especially with a snake that's as valuable as Twinkie. Like, Twinkie got him a world record. You would think that he would pretty much immediately, as soon as he noticed there was something wrong, have a vet come in. And especially if he's selling so many snakes and he is making this much money, he can afford a vet visit. You know what I mean? Or a few vet visits for this snake.
And what I found is that in most cases, they'll lay the eggs over the course of the year. What happens is the eggs start to go bad and they get kind of slimy. When they get slimy, they end up slipping out.
The sliminess, that means the eggs are rotting, which means it's essentially like if a woman is pregnant and her child dies inside of her body and then you just leave it there. That can cause so many problems. Again, not only the adhering to the uterus, but like it can cause an infection in the body. Like it can cause serious infections and serious problems. So I do not recommend that at all. I do not recommend, if your snakes are egg bound, do not just leave them in there. Go take your snake to the vet. I don't care if 98% of the time it works its way out, especially like waiting until they are obviously rotting inside of her body. That is kind of neglect. Like, I'm sorry, it just is. I'm not trying to like say anything negative too much about either of these people, but like that is unacceptable. That's unacceptable to me. If you value your animals and your animal's life, don't just leave them if they're egg bound.
There's a direct link between a python obesity.
That is true. This is a very common trend in obese female does have a higher likelihood of becoming egg bound or having some other complication with laying eggs.
Jay power fed her. That is basically when somebody excessively feeds a python so that it just keeps growing. And that is a very intentional thing that he did to Twinkie and many of his other pythons.
So, you know, it's a little bit intentional to get them that big by giving them, you know, something they probably wouldn't get in the wild. They don't get fed every day in the wild, so Twinkie gets a consistent diet throughout the whole year.
I wouldn't have let the snake get that big to begin with, and power feeding is a thing, and I really do hope that he was not trying to feed her every single day, because that's way out there. Like I said, I had a big boa constrictor, and she would eat a really large meal about once a month. Even once a week for a snake that big might be, I mean, that's also a lot, unless you're feeding like really, really small meals once a week. If he did power feed her, though, that explains why she died so early, because it can really cut a snake's life in half if you power feed them.
An obese reticulated python's tail,
yeah, I can see that,
off suddenly, whereas one
I don't know what that is
just of a normal weight. Another reason is to give female snakes a food reserve when they go off food while breeding.
Like, I do kind of understand that. I feed my females more than I feed my males, because the females do need the extra calories and all that to make eggs and successfully lay them without losing a lot of their own body weight in that time. Like, I do understand feeding females a little bit more, but I don't agree with feeding them so much that they just like get fat. Of course, again, this is different. They are pythons. I have corn snakes. There are some like very similar issues that can happen with a snake being overweight or underweight, and there's a healthy amount to feed anything. But if it comes down to overfeeding or underfeeding, overfeeding is worse for them.
Another practice that Jay has been heavily criticized for is the way that he removes baby pythons from their eggs before they're ready. Jay does exactly what is advised not to do. He has responded to the concerns, and he says that he cuts the eggs because he doesn't want them to drown, but then he pulls them outside of the egg so that he can check if the umbilical cord is wrapped around.
So you don't need to do that. You don't need to check if the umbilical cord is wrapped around them if you haven't bothered them. And that is something I have to agree with Sid on here. The umbilical cord, which is attached to the snake's belly, and that is attached to the yolk. The snake will use the egg tooth to actually cut through the actual egg itself. And it will usually sit in the egg for 24 to 48 hours. And while it's sitting in the egg, that's when it is absorbing the yolk. The purpose is the umbilical cord and the yolk and everything will be absorbed into the snake's body. So the umbilical cord can't get wrapped around the snake if the snake is left undisturbed. So if the snake has been disturbed and it's been moving around in the egg a lot, it might wrap itself around, but that's really, really uncommon. The only time that I can really think that a snake would have an issue with that is when it's about to hatch and it hasn't absorbed all of that yolk yet, along with the umbilical cord. Then, like what's happening in this video, then it might wrap itself around that umbilical cord.
But really, he's only pulling them out of the egg so that he can check what morph they are.
See what we got here. Looks like opening up real Pokemon cards.
As a Pokemon fan, I'm offended. Just wait 2 days. Just wait 2 days until they come out on their own. You'll find out. You will find out what morph they are. You just have to have like a little bit of self-control.
Sometimes he'll even open up an egg, immediately see that it's not a cool color, and just move on from it.
Yeah, like that also puts at risk his most expensive animals. You're looking through the eggs, you're opening them all up, and you're looking at morphs, and the only ones that you pull out of the egg are the ones that are like really, really high-end expensive morphs. Like, you are really just shooting yourself in the foot. It's unnecessary in most cases to cut eggs, period. But it's especially unnecessary to pull any part of that snake out of the egg. Just let it come out. It'll come out in like 2 days or less.
The main issues that I've seen in viral tweets and TikToks is that Jay treats his reptiles as if they are some kind of prop for a video or social media post. He deliberately interacts with pythons that he knows are grumpy so he can get some kind of reaction out of them.
I purposely got in my cage with all my big mean ones.
He piles massive snakes on top of each other for content to the point where they could seriously get injured. Or he'll just taunt his reptiles to try and get some kind of stress reaction out of them.
I do have to, again, agree with Sid on this one. Like, yeah, he is being critical, but I think that these are perfectly things to be critical about. Most of them. I mentioned a few things here and there that I kind of didn't agree on just because, like, people who aren't, like, in the reptile breeding space may think certain things are abnormal when they're really not. But I also don't like, I think one of the meanest things that you can do is make a snake angry on purpose, or any animal angry on purpose, just so that they will lash out. I think that that's just really cruel. I don't think that people should be taunting their animals. Like, if you actually care about your animals, you want them to be happy, healthy, and not hate you.
On Yelp, there is a pretty significant number of 1-star reviews. One thing that I kept seeing repeated in the reviews was that the store smelt bad.
I mean, if we're talking about smell, I know I keep mentioning BHB and the Reptarium. It's because I just recently went there, and you could not smell reptiles in there. It smells very similar to, like, even like a botanical conservatory of some kind, or just a place like that that's just like warm and humid. It sounds like maybe they're not cleaned as much as they should be.
Be pleasant to the average person. But the good thing about Yelp is that photos can be posted alongside a review. And photos were posted of dirty enclosures and bowls full of uneaten, rotting, dead mice.
Yeah, that is really bad. Like, when I feed my snakes, I make sure that if they don't eat, that is taken out immediately. Like within a few hours. Like, I put the food in, oh, you didn't eat it, I'm gonna take this out, because, like, it can get really gross really fast.
I can definitely see why the smell of the store was something that a lot of people took note of. But something else that could be adding to the smell are the dead or dying animals. Also photographed were some reptiles on their very last legs, if they weren't already dead. And there's a lot of reptiles with mouth issues pictured in the reviews.
Definitely need to make sure that your enclosures are big enough. If you notice, like, a lot of nose rubbing, your snake needs a different enclosure. Your snake just needs a different enclosure, and it's the same way with anything. If the enclosure is too small, it could be not only that they're trying to escape, but that they literally can't move around. Like, it looked like that, I don't know if it was a monitor or what it was, but it looked like it literally couldn't even move, like, turn around in the enclosure without hitting its face on something. So I again, I have to agree with Sid on this one.
Jay has used the reasoning that snakes prefer smaller enclosures because it causes them less stress if they can just curl up in a tight space.
That's only really true for, like, young, unestablished snakes. They're put from, like, a shoebox size enclosure, which this big or so, the size of a shoebox, all the way up to, like, a 20-gallon or bigger. That can kind of be a shock to their system, and it might stress them into not feeding. So whenever a young or baby snake, you put them in a vastly different environment, it might stress them into not eating. But if it's a snake that's well established in your home, and that's used to you, used to the way that you're feeding them, all of that, then it is fine to move them to a bigger enclosure. It is better for them to have more space, places to hide, things to do, things to climb on, etc., than to just always have them in a tight space. Like, that is honestly not fair to the snakes.
Yeah. But another reason why they rub their noses up against the glass is because they have mites. There are many complaints in the reviews and all over the internet that Jay's reptiles have mites. I will just say that these small enclosures are also used for the permanent reptiles in the zoo portion of the premises. So yeah, while some reptiles may eventually get freed by somebody purchasing them, many of these reptiles are sentenced to a lifetime in these tiny enclosures. Also, countless enclosures either have no water bowl or have empty water bowls. Yeah, at the end of the day, from what I've observed, Jay is very passionate about reptiles. But yeah, it seems like he has long lost interest in reptiles that come in their normal, natural form, when a giant python or a cool looking python can get him so many more likes and views. We see pet shops like Petco get criticized all of the time all over the place. So I just think Jay's pet store and zoo should be held to the same standard.
So that was that video. Obviously that wasn't the whole thing. I have been sitting here for an hour and 20 minutes personally, and obviously this whole thing is not going to go in there. I, for the most part, agree with Sid on this. Like, I don't want it to be that way. And I do believe that for the most part, people deserve a little bit of grace and room to grow. So, for example, I did things 10 years ago in this hobby that I would never think about doing today. And I'm probably doing things today that 10 years from now I will not do. But it doesn't seem like Jay is trying to grow or improve. And I don't think that he's a bad person. I do have concerns about his whole facility and everything, especially if the reptiles are covered in mites. I understand that mites can happen. Like, they can happen from just anything. Like, you can go to a reptile expo, not even touch a reptile, and still come back with mites. So I'm not going to judge someone for getting them. What I do judge someone for is if you don't try to get rid of them. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I just thought that you guys might kind of find this interesting. I am going to be doing more reaction videos to other people's videos, because that was something that was requested of me, like at least reacting to care guides for corn snakes. But this really like hit me hard because I used to watch Jay from Prehistoric Pets all the time on YouTube, and I've kind of stopped in the last nearly decade, I want to say. I mostly watched his stuff like way back at the beginning of his YouTube channel, so it was kind of weird to see someone like Sid pop up and be talking about a reptile person that I have known about pretty much my entire reptile hobby career thing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, please subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this, and if there are any other videos that you would like me to react to that are at the least reptile related, preferably sticking with corn snakes. I know this was an exception, but just let me know if there's anything down below that you would like me to react to, and I will see you in a new video soon. Thanks for watching.